Welcome to video 12 in the Different Angle 3D video tutorial series for Blender 2.9. This is the fourth video in the From a Cube to a Hay Barn project, and it'll be the final video in the project. In the previous videos, video 9, we created a reference image from some photographs in GIMP that we could use to size the structure of the barn and keep the proportions of height, width and depth of the barn similar to what you would expect in the real world. And then in video 10 and 11 we converted the default cube into an RSJ and formed the structure of the barn, and also added the roofing sheets in video 11 to the top of the barn. This video we're going to add the side sheeting and purlins and then give each of the components a different colour and set up a very basic render to be able to render out the image of the barn that we've created in the project. This is where we left video 11. We just created the corrugated sheets on the roof, and it's noticeable in the viewport that the shading we're using at the moment doesn't really show it up as corrugated steel, more like just a curved flat panel. So we can easily change the shading when we're modelling to something that can be a little bit clearer to work with. And in the top right hand of the viewport window, you've got the shading drop down. At the moment we're on Studio with a fairly flat viewport shading. There's other options within the Studio setup that can give you brighter or more contrasting views, but you've also got the option of matcap options, which give you much clearer shading, or there's certainly a lot more options in matcap where you can have some really crazy lighting and shading depending on what you're doing with Blender, whether you need really contrasting shading to show up curves on car panels and things like that. But with the matte caps activated, the studio light really is adequate to give you a much clearer view of what we've created already. But we've created the roof. I'm going to move on now to do the purlins for the sides and the back of the barn. And if we go into numpad 3, if you remember when we created the purlins, I dragged off a plane from the purlins that we were creating to use for the side purlins. So this is a good time to get back to that point. What I'm going to do is just, with all the purlins selected, tab into edit mode and then Alt-A to deselect everything. And then with the mouse close to one of the vertices on the plane that we created, just link select to select everything. And I'm going to separate this off into the side purlin as a different object. So if we press P to separate and then selection, it's now created purlins 001. So we can tab out of edit mode for the purlins, select purlins 001 and tab back into this just to work on this one item. Also in the outliner we can put this one as purlins side, so we can easily identify it as we're working through the project. So one project problem at the moment is the sheet is penetrating the purlin plane is penetrating the roof sheets. So if we go into Z for wireframe and just click on wireframe, we can select the two top vertices and grab them with the G key and then move them on the Y axis. So you press the Y key to constrain the axis. Grab them with the G key, then press the Z axis to constrain them and just bring them down so the vertex is sitting below, or just below the corrugated sheets. And if you really want to, you can then Alt-A to deselect everything, select the top right vertex and grab that with the G key on the Z axis with the Z key, and just move it up so it's pretty much parallel with the roofing sheets as the first purlin shape. That's probably quite a bit wider than what we've got on the others, so we could just move that across, but what I'm going to do is cut that down the middle, and with the knife tool, if you press the K, because we're working on just a single plane, we can hold down the control key and that automatically snaps it to the midpoint of a line. So if you snap it to the midpoint of the top line or the top edge and then control snap it to the midpoint of the bottom edge and enter, we can just delete the two vertices that were on the right hand side, and it's now a more realistic size in line with the top purlins. And then select all. What I'm going to do is move it back just very slightly from the edge of the RSJ, grab X, grab Y and just move it back a little bit so it's not interfering with the shading of the RSJ when we take this and move it down for some of the lower purlins. And also I'm going to go Shift D to duplicate it, escape. We're still in the pivot point as the 3D cursor, which is on the center line of the barn, so we can now mirror that to the other side with Control M and then Y to mirror it across to the other side and enter. So if we select all now and go into top view, numpad 7, or even front view numpad 1, we can drag this across or extrude it across. So we use the extrude command E, and let's just do that again. Enter that. So it seemed to be stuck on there, but go to view pad 1, extrude on the x-axis to the end of the barn, or the end of the RSJs. If we zoom in again, we can now bring the end vertices inside the center of the end RSJ. Now we've got two RSJs, one 90 degrees to the other on the back view. So if you go into view 1, the first RSJ doesn't go as far back into the barn. The center RSJ doesn't go as far back into the barn as the end RSJ. So we can bring this back so it's roughly inside the central web of the RSJ. So I grab X and bring it back so it sits roughly inside the web. And if we do Control I to invert the selection, zoom in on the other end and do exactly the same and just bring it back, grab X, bring it back so it sits just inside again the center web of the RSJ. So that gives us the first two side purlins. Now we've got to recreate on one side there's a couple of purlins where the sheets can part way down the side. If I just bring the reference image back into view and numpad 3 so we're looking end on. So we've got two purlins sitting on this side, two purlins sitting across the back, and there'll be one purlin sitting part way underneath the curve of the roof structure to hold this front edge. So what we can do now is on the right hand side, I'm going to go and take the reference image out of view again. On the right hand side we can convert this one now to the shape of the side purlin in a moment. So Alt A and box select just the right hand purlin we've created, and Shift D on the Z axis just to bring it down a little bit. Now what we need to do is move these two vertices down level with that end vertex. At the moment we've got the magnet snap set to snap to edges. What we want is to snap to a vertex. So we'll change the setting from edge to vertex, and we're still using the magnet snap on the active vertex. So if we Alt-A to deselect everything, we now want to select the two vertices that are on this top edge of the purlin. So again, go into numpad 3, and we can use circle select, because the circle selection will select both the front and the back vertex, and the box select will do the same. And then grab on the Z axis down to that vertex. We haven't got an active vertex, but both vertices are on the same plane on the Z, Y axis, so it will bring them down level with that vertex. That gives us the second purlin on that side. Alt-A to deselect it, or box select then, and Shift-D to duplicate it and move it down. So we grab it on the Z axis and escape. Grab on the Z axis to bring it down a little bit lower. And that gives us the second purlin. So if we bring the reference image back in, we can now position the second purlin where the reference image purlin meets the front sheet. So again, grab Z and bring it down, then Alt-A, and then box select the vertices on the purlin above that, and grab Z and bring that down again level with that sheet. If we take the image away again and look at that, now we've got the two purlins in the correct position. What we need now is a back purlin, or two back purlins and a front purlin. So again, we can reuse the purlin we've just dragged down. If we go into top view, numpad 7, we'll hide the corrugated roof out of view because it's getting in the way, and with the vertex selected, or sorry, vertices of that one purlin selected in top view numpad 7, we can Shift-D to duplicate it, drag it away from where we're working, and then rotate it 90 degrees. We've rotated around the pivot point rather than the center point of that because we're on the active pivot point as the center. But we can then drag this, and I'll take the snap off for the moment, position it on the back edge. Again, so it sits inside the RSJ on the back edge, and the other side will Alt-A to deselect everything, and then box select the vertices on the back of that purlin and grab them on the Y axis, bringing it down roughly flush again with the back of the side RSJ. So grab Y and bring it back roughly so it sits just inside that RSJ. So when we look now, we've got the purlin sitting across the back, and we can again bring the reference image back in to view, and numpad 3. Now that one is sitting slightly above, somewhere halfway between the two purlins at the back edge. So if we go grab Z and move that one so it's roughly half, Alt-A, Control Z, link select to select everything because we haven't got it fully selected, and then grab Z so it sits just below the curve of the top roof, and then Shift-D to duplicate it, Z, and move it down so it sits level with the bottom side purlin. I noticed on the right hand side they're not quite sitting up to the RSJ, so I'm going to go Alt-A to deselect everything, box select the end of these purlins, and grab on the Y, and just take them across. We're not using snap at this point with magnet snap off. We could snap it directly onto there, but they wouldn't be tight up against there, they'd be on brackets anyway. So again, take the reference image out, and that now gives us the back and side purlins, and I'm going to just Alt-A to deselect that, so everything's deselected. Then link select, so it's L when you're near the purlin that's sitting just below the arc of the roof RSJ. Go into numpad 1 and take it a copy across to the other end, so it's Shift D X and bring it across to the front, and then grab X to bring it out so it's sitting on the outside of the RSJ, and that gives us the framework then that we can put our steel sheets to. So we'll bring the steel sheets down onto that at the front and down to the bottom RSJs on the one side and the back. So that completes the purlins, and tab back into object mode. If we put the corrugated sheets back into view in the outliner, and Z for solid, and then Alt-A so we deselect everything, you can see we're getting the frame now to build the side sheets, front and back sheets too. We've got the structure in now to hold the side sheets, so we can still profile of the corrugated steel from the curved roof. So select the curved roof, or in the outliner click on the corrugated object. If we zoom in and go into numpad 7, what we need is to tab into edit mode and steal the vertices that are over the x-axis indicator that runs on the x-axis at world 0. So if we press Z for the shading view and go to wireframe shading, and then Alt-A to deselect all, we can press B to box select the vertices that are over the x-axis. We now need to duplicate those into another object, so you press Shift D to duplicate, and if you move them it completely messes up the array modifier, because there's an array modifier applied to the corrugated object. So press Escape to leave them where they are, and then press P for the separate menu, and from choose selection to separate them into a new object. In the outliner we've now got a corrugated 001 object, which we can rename by double clicking and changing its name to corrugated sides. And press enter. So we've got that. We could actually rename the corrugated sheets now as well to keep it easy to find things in the outline to corrugated roof. If we click on corrugated sides, you'll see we've got the profile of the roof sheets only running down the full length of the barn. So if we select all, tab escape, tab into object mode, select corrugated sides, tab back into edit mode and select all, we've got the selected vertices and all of the edges following down the side of the barn. What we need to do now is rotate that through 90 degrees so it can be used on the side of the building, or side of the barn. At the moment we're in the 3D cursor as the pivot point, so I'm going to change that to medium point, otherwise it would rotate from the world 0 away from the object. And what we can do now is rotate that on the Z axis, rotate on the x-axis 90 degrees. It's rotated round to the opposite way, so I'm going to rotate it again on the x-axis 180 degrees so it's correct for the right hand side of the barn. What we can do now is in top view, numpad 7, grab the side sheets and move them on the y-axis, so it's G for grab, Y for the axis, and drag the profile of the sheets out until they're just past the side of the RSJ. It's probably easier to see in side view, and we can just free drag them in side view and bring them down so they're just sitting on the outside of the RSJ and just outside the purlins that we've created for them. And then with them all selected, which is only the first view plus the array modifier, we can extrude them on the Z axis. So it's E for extrude, Z for the axis, and drag them down until they're just below the bottom of the second purlin on the side, and that gives us the first set of side sheets. What I'm going to do now is create a new object from this. So I'm going to again select all for the side sheets, Shift D to duplicate it, press Escape to leave it where it is, and then P to separate it off into another item. So we've got corrugated sides 001. I'll tab back into object mode and select corrugated sides 001 and rename this to corrugated front, because we're going to rotate this one round now and use it to create the corrugated sheets on the front of the building. So in top view, numpad 7, with corrugated front selected, we can tab into edit mode, select all, and I'm going to tab back into, for this one, I'll tab back into object mode and apply the modifier, because we've got to cut these sheets to suit the front profile. So there's a little drop down on the right hand side of the array modifier icons, and we'll click apply. This can only be done in object mode, which is why we've tabbed back into object mode. And then the object can, numpad 7, be tabbed into edit mode, select all, which is A, to make sure all the vertices are selected, and then rotate 90 for 90 degrees, and we can then grab them and drag them out to fit the front of the barn. Go into numpad 3, and we only want them to sit level with the outside of the RSJ, outside of the RSJ. So just zoom in and grab them on the y-axis and drag them across very slightly, and then we'll go to the other side of the vertical RSJs and select the vertex just outside the RSJ. So you've got one vertex left on the outside of the RSJ. Select the next vertex and X to delete it, and delete that vertex. Then zoom, we'll pan down so you can see the opposite vertex on the top of the sheets. Select that one and X to delete the vertices. What we can do now is link select the right hand corrugated sheets that we don't need, and delete those first of all, and that gives us an area where we can then box select the rest of the vertices we don't need, X vertices, then box select, or we could have pressed select all for all of the vertices that we've created with the array modifier. We need to just merge all the double vertices, so M for merge, and by distance, and you'll see there's 128 vertices deleted, so everything's now joined into one object. Again, Alt A to deselect all, and we need to drag these top vertices above the curve of the roof. So if we go B for box select, select the top row of vertices, G for grab, Z for the axis, and grab them all so they're above the curve of the roof. And we need these to be cut now, so we can separate the top section from the bottom section. The easy way to do this is to if we go into numpad 7, you can see we're in front at the moment of the roof sheets. So if we go into numpad 1, the sheets are sitting too far out from the barn, so we need to pull them back so they're sitting level with the face of the vertical RSJ. So tab back into edit mode, select all, and grab on the x-axis and bring them back so they're just in front of the RSJ. And if we go into Z for solid view, you'll see now we've got the roof penetrating through the front sheets of the, or what will be the back sheets of the barn. So at this point what we can do is add a modifier to use the Boolean operation to cut the roof sheets through the front sheets. So with the front sheets selected, I think this can be done in edit mode as well as object mode. We go to the modifiers panel and we choose the Boolean modifier, and we want to use the color picker or the object picker, and we can pick as the object that creates the Boolean operation the corrugated roof. So you click on that, and what it should do, if it's worked properly, union or intersect, just tab into object mode, and it's cut the sheets where they intersect with the roof and created a new object for the two. So the difference is probably what we want, because we just want that one row of vertices that are sitting where we've cut with the sheets, and we'll have to recreate then the new bottom edge. It's left the top unfortunately rather than the bottom, but we can work with that. What we must do now then is to apply the modifier. We're in object mode, so click apply. That makes the mesh object the curve but the wrong side of the barn. So we could drag everything down below from above. That may mess the normals up, but I'll try that first of all. So Alt A to deselect everything, select the top edge, and then grab Z and drag it down. I'm going to drag it down so it's just below the purlins. So if we go into 3 and then Z wireframe, and that's not too bad at all. Grab Z, escape, grab Z, just bring it up so it's sitting slightly below the bottom of the purlin. And then what we can do is duplicate that. So we'll select all the vertices, Shift D to duplicate it, and then X to move it on the X-axis and bring it across to the back. And then again in front view, position it so it sits pretty much in front of the RSJ. So grab X in front of the RSJ, and all we want to do is select the bottom vertices. So again, take the mouse over the bottom edge somewhere, press the Alt key and left mouse button select, and that will select the loop of vertices running across the bottom edge. Again into front view, numpad 3, and then grab Z for the axis and bring them down to just below the second purlin for the back view. If we now go Z for solid, we've got the barn sheeted out. Tab into object mode, Alt A to deselect all, and we've got the barn sheeted out now, as you would expect a Dutch barn with the ventilation. So it keeps the rain off the hay but allows lots of ventilation through. That's the basic construction. A little bit of care was probably needed because we've lost a vertex. We'd actually dragged one of the roof vertices down. So what I'm going to do to correct that is tab back into edit mode for the front and back roof sheets, and we'll go into edge select the front edge, right click to bring up the subdivide, or bring up the edge context menu, and click subdivide, and then back in vertex view, grab the vertex. We'll reinitiate object snap, and it's on snap to vertex at the moment, and go grab the vertex, Y for the axis, and snap it onto the bottom outermost vertex, and then in numpad 3 we'll grab that on the Z axis, just move it up, making sure we don't snap onto anything, just bring it up close to the roof just to clean that side up a little bit. Tab, and we've got the barn looking reasonable. There's always an amount of cleaning up to do, but as the model goes, for a distance model, that's probably got as much detail as would need. One of the things I am going to add in view 1 is there's no sway braces, so we need to have something. Again, we'll bring in the side view. It's got a few sway braces just to stabilise the barn from rocking in the wind. We can add things like that in just as a small cube that's been extruded out with the ends cropped at 45 degrees. So we'll do that next. I'm going to reuse a vertex from one of the existing objects so that everything in the project has originated from the original default cube. We could just add a cube object and work from that, but just to keep it in line with the name of the project. So first of all, I'll just press Shift, middle mouse button, and drag the scene across a little so we can work close to the front RSJ. And the sheeting, corrugated sheeting, is getting in the way of what we're doing as well. So in the outliner, I'll just take, by closing the eye icon, the corrugated front, corrugated roof and corrugated sides out of view. So we've just got the purlins and the RSJ and the background reference image. So if we zoom into the top corner, we've got the RSJ and the purlins. I'm going to work on the side purling because there's no array modifier on that. So select it with the left mouse button, then tab into edit mode, select a vertex that's on the front face of the purlin, and then Shift D to duplicate it, and just move it down roughly to where the purlin will be located between the the sway brace will be located between the purlin and the RSJ. What we can do now is, as we've done before, is separate it out from the purlin side object by using P for part, and that opens a separate menu, and then click selection. So that's made that vertex into its own object called purlin side 001, and I'm going to tab back into object mode, select purlin side 001. There's very little to see at the moment on that, but I'm going to change its name to sway brace. So that's what we'll be working on, and with sway brace active, I'm going to tab into edit mode, and you'll see the vertex now shows up in edit mode. And I'm going to go into Z for wireframe view so we can see what we need to do with that. So first of all, I'm going to select the vertex, just grab on the x-axis and move it just outside the RSJ to begin with, and then extrude it on the x-axis and drag it across longer than we need, so we've got an edge that's running longer than the sway brace will end up being. And then with both vertices of that edge selected, we can rotate it through 45 degrees. So it's just half a rotate and 45 because we're doing it in numpad one, which is the front view, and we want to rotate it on the front view. So we can now drag that. So just grab and drag it so it sits somewhere in the region of where the sway brace is on the picture. Doesn't look like it's quite 45, but that may be the camera distortion on the original background image. And just bring it down a little bit, because we only want it to come to the bottom of the purlin that runs across the top of the RSJs. So we can now extrude this. So it's E for extrude, and just extrude it down a little bit, just to, so it's roughly the same width of what's in the image behind us. So maybe slightly bigger, and that gives us the one side of what will be the first sway brace. Now I'm going to take the image out of view now because it's in the way, and what we can do is use Blender's knife snap. So we'll zoom in where it crosses the bottom of the purlin and go K, and just click very close, or as close as you can on the bottom of the purlin. If you zoom in, it's better, and then C to constrain it, and that constrains it at 90 and 45 degree angles, and then left click again to confirm that you want that cut, and then enter to cut to that point. And we can then delete the two end vertices by selecting both of them with left mouse button, shift left mouse button, and then pressing X to delete the vertices. So we've got the first part of the sway bracing. The second part will need to be cut roughly to the center web of the RSJ, and I'm going to again use the knife and use the innermost of the two central edges, and just roughly position the knife over those. K for the knife, click close on that edge, C for constrain, and just drag vertically downwards, and then left mouse button click and enter for that, and delete the other two vertices. And we'll go X once they're selected, and delete and select vertices. So you can select all now and go into top view, which is numpad 7, and then go to the front corner where we're working, and the sway brace needs to sit roughly central, but first of all we need to give it some thickness. So with everything selected, we can extrude that and just drag the mouse. It will be constrained already to the y-axis because that's the direction of the face normal that we're extruding, roughly to the same thickness as the front, and that gives us a box section. And we can now select all and then grab that and move it on the y-axis roughly to the center of the RSJ that we've got at the front. So that gives us something that will represent the first sway brace. But most box sections have got slightly rounded corners, so again what we can do is just bevel the four edges that run at 45 degrees. So if we go into edge select mode and just select those four edges, we don't need to bevel everything, and then with the shortcut Control B, and just drag the Control B for bevel. For some reason that isn't working. Bevel operator will just make the size of it in the bevel panel just 0.0115, gives us a very small, well, quite a large bevel. Controls 0.0015, too small, so we can just change these numbers if it hasn't worked with the mouse. So I'll put 1.03 to give us a bevel, and just roll. That's rolling on the view, so we want to set the segments to 3, just to give us a slightly rounded corner. Tab back into object mode, and we've now got the first of the sway braces in place. So what I'm going to do now is go into view 1 so we can look at it side on, and we can compare that to the reference image, and you can see it's pretty much covering where the sway brace is for that. So again, take the view reference image out of view, and we can now, it's as simple to just copy these across than it is to set up an array modifier, because we can't array to the end one, so we'd have to do some mirroring and what have you for that, so it's just quick to copy them across. So I'm going to again tab back into edit mode, go into vertex select, and with the magnet snap set to edge, I'm going to just shift D on to duplicate it on the x-axis and move it across. I'm going to zoom in, select one of the end vertices and deselect an end vertex and reselect it, so you've got one that's the active vertex that the snap will now work to. And zooming in, we'll again grab X and grab it across and just snap it to a vertex on that inner web of the RSJ, and we can just repeat that, shift DX, and again zoom in, grab X and just snap it to the inner web, shift DX, and that's all. Just grab X and snap it to the inner web. So we've now got 4 of the sway braces in place, and I'm going to link select all 4 of them and go shift D to duplicate them and then escape. And because we're in median point for the transform, we can just mirror those. So it's Control M on the x-axis and enter, and that gives us the other 4 for the other side. So we zoom in, shift select bottom vertex on the leftmost edge, and I've just moved, so I'm not sure I've quite got one yet, and reselect it so it becomes the active vertex on that edge. And then back in numpad 1, we can grab it on the x-axis, so it's grab X and bring it across, and again snap it to the web of the end RSJ. So we've got all of them on this side of the barn. We can now select all, go into numpad 3, numpad 3 for the front of the barn, which is a side view of the of Blender's coordinates, and shift D to duplicate all of those, shift D, and on the y-axis move it across so it's roughly central with the center of the vertical RSJ on this side. And that pretty much finishes a representation of the barn. So if we tab back into object mode, just scroll the view around, from underneath you can see all the sway braces in place. Press Alt A to deselect everything, and then put the corrugated sheets back in and go Z for solid view. You can see we've got a fairly good representation now of the barn. If you want to, you can go to far more detail by putting fitch plates to bolt all the sway braces in, plates for bolting the arc of the roof and the back RSJ, brackets that would hold purlins and make them individual. But for a representation rather than an engineering drawing, this gives us a good model of a barn we can use. So the next thing to do is actually get an output render of this, and we'll do that by reorganizing the components and just giving them a color and setting up a basic cycles render in a moment. Outputting a render is very much like taking a photograph, but you're doing it within the virtual world. We've got a camera, a light, within the scene and the barn model. The light isn't the easiest way to set up, because you need to set up multiple lights and various other elements. And a quick, easy way is to use a HDRI environment map on the background. It sounds complicated, but it's quite an easy setup. And for this, we set it up within the world properties. So in the properties editor, I'm just going to click on the world tab, and you'll see it's got an option of use nodes, and the background it's currently using a colour, and the colour is the grey that we see when we go into rendered mode, which isn't a very pretty picture, and the lighting is just the current light, which I'm not going to use. We'll just use an environment map. So I'm going to select the light and press X to delete it. We can add further lights in if they're needed, but again, it's not a very user-friendly image. It almost looks like a foggy night. So first of all, we need an environment texture, and I'm going to, for this, just use one I found on HDRI Haven, which are CC0 HDRI maps. There's lots of other HDRI sites that give free or very economically priced HDRIs, and I would say that if you do use somebody's free HDRI off one of the free sites, do consider supporting them for the use of that by either a single donation or joining their Patreon page. They put a lot of work in going out to get these photographs that they can use as the environment maps, and a lot of work goes into it, so it's always worth supporting people that try and give you things to help, and in many cases for free for the people that are doing it as a hobby or can't actually afford to buy them. So that's HDRI Haven, and it's the Straw Rolls Field 01, but you could choose other ones if you wish. And what we do for that is, in the world samples, it's already set to use nodes as default, and we've got the colour as the background. If you click on the small dot to the left of the background colour, it opens up some options, and one of those options is the environment texture. So we can click on that. Everything goes orange at the moment, or sorry, it goes purple, because we haven't got a background environment texture loaded. So we can click open, and I've just put it in the directory I'm using to keep the files for the project together, and we just click on the Straw Rolls Field HDRI and open it, and it'll convert now to have a background that is taken from that HDRI map, and that lights the subject. But again, at the moment we haven't got any materials for it to light up, so we need to now look at changing the materials. So very rough material, I'm just going to put a colour on, and in the materials panel we'll select to start with the RSJ frame, and in the materials panel, so in the properties editor, click on the materials panel. It comes straight away with the principled BSDF shader, which gives you lots of control to just drag that up so you can see some more of the controls. Lots of controls to determine how the shader is, whether it's metallic or paint or what have you. Keeps it very simple than trying to build them from individual nodes. And all I'm going to do for this tutorial is change the base colour. And for the RSJ, I think I picked a blue one on some of the ones I've done previously, so I'm going to pick a blue one. Everything will turn blue because at the moment the colour is just material for everything. So what we need to do now is change the materials for the other components. So first of all, I'm going to select the after the RSJ, just zoom in. That gives us a reasonable colour. So I'll zoom in on the roof now and change that to a new material. And in the materials properties, we've got the material panel. Just because I've moved everything to the top, I'm going to move this down a little bit so it's where I'm used to using it. we've got the material. We want to change that to a different material. So what I'm going to do is go on the plus and minus arrows, go plus to add a new material, and then delete out material from that box by pressing the -1. That defaults back to the basic colour we were working with for the roof. So we can now add a new material into that material slot. And this time I'm going to change it from the fairly white colour to a green. I'll make it a little bit darker, more subdued. So we've got material 001. I'm going to change that to green for the green sheets, and then go into the front and back sheets, and I'm going to change the material next to where it says material in the text box. The drop down there now gives you an option for material or green, so I'm going to use green for those two, and also do exactly the same for the back. The drop down gives you green again. So that gives us a green roof with blue steelwork and blue purlins. The purlins were wood. I'm just going to select the purlins, and they're all one object. Sorry, the purlin side are all one object. And again, add a new material within the material slots. Delete the material that's already in there, and then again add a new material, and this time just give it a brown colour so we can see it. Just bring the darkness down so it stands out against the green, and that gives us we'll take some basic colours for the barn. I'm going to roll round because we haven't done the roof purlins, which were also timber, and again they've got the material object on them, so from the drop down we can put material 001, which is the brown material, and rename that to brown. And that gives us a barn that has got all the structure of a barn, and it's being lit in Eevee at the moment. What I'm going to do is use cycles, because there's an option in cycles that's very simple, and that's a shadow catcher. At the moment, if we put anything underneath it, there's no shadow. It will just it's standing in the middle of 3D space with no floor to stand on. What we can do is add a shadow catcher, and to do that we'll take a new object. So for the floor itself, not the barn, to add a new object it's Shift A, and we're going to add a mesh and a plane, and that adds a 2 metre square underneath the front of the barn. And we can scale this up by pressing S with the S key, or we can just change its size in here and make it quite very large, so it covers all around the barn area, and then just centre it up. So grab it on the Shift Z so it moves it on the XY plane, move it so it encompasses the area around the barn. I'm just going to scale it a bit bigger, and again scale to cover it, so any shadows that are cast will be caught by the shadow catcher. In the properties panel, we need to change the render engine to Eevee, from Eevee, which is in as standard when you open Blender, to cycles. And because we're in rendered view, you can see straight away we're now starting to get a lot more of the shadows and the softer effects you get from cycles out of the can, effectively, from when you first open it up. And we need to then change the plane object into a shadow catcher. So we'll go into object mode with the plane selected, and under shading and visibility rather, we need to change activate shadow catcher, and you can see the plane becomes completely transparent, and where the plane was, it's now just catching the shadows that are coming off the barn itself. A couple of optimizations we need to do as well with the render. In the render properties panel, we're now in cycles, First thing is to activate denoising for render, which speeds up the render process quite quickly. And if you want to put it on the model on a plain background, you've got the option under Film tab to go down. You've got the transparent option, which means it's rendered with nothing behind it, so you can take it into an image editor and put any colour or any type of background behind it. We've now got some easy and nice render settings for the barn. Before we can render out, we render from the camera's view, and you can see the camera isn't pointing at the bar. To look through the camera, you press 0 on the numpad, and you can see we'd only render 2 tiny bits of the barn itself. So an easy way to set the camera up, other than the normal transform, sort of grab, rotate and what have you, is to rotate the view until you're happy with it. I'll just come out of render view to speed things up. Rotate the view until you're happy with what you're looking at with the barn. And then what you can do is press Ctrl-Alt-0 and it moves the camera to give you a view from the same plane that you was looking at in the viewport. So again, if in rendered view, just to check that it looks reasonably okay, what we can do now is just use the normal transform to improve on that slightly by grabbing select the camera and grabbing the camera and just moving it slightly till we're showing some of the internal structure and some of the shadow. Again, it's not really very responsive on my computer, so I'll go back to the just basic shaded view and just grab the camera and move it up, and also take the snap off, because that sometimes affects the performance of how you pan around the screen. And we'll grab, and that gives you a nice clearer view. And you've got options as well to change the camera while it's selected, to change the focal length to something a little bit longer so you can get closer in, and also to rotate the camera on. I'm going to rotate it on the Z axis slightly. Sorry, camera selected, rotate Z. I want to bring the camera a little more. That's better. To that sort of position, and then grab, bring it over to give us what will hopefully be a nice render on a transparent background, so you can put any background that you choose behind it. And then it's just a case of either from the menu at the top left hand corner clicking render image, or using the shortcut F12 and render, and Blender will then go through the process of working out what's in the scene and rendering the scene out block by block as it works around the image, calculating where the light is, where the shadows are, and giving you quite a nice image of a barn that wasn't very difficult to build, and certainly within most people's capability as a first model, and give you some background in Blender. With the render complete, all that's left to do is to save the image, and from the top left menu of the image viewer we just click on Image, Save As, and I'm just going to put this as barn render. .png in the same folder that I'm putting the video clips for the tutorial. Save as image, and we can now take this into an image editor, GIMP, or do it in Blender's compositor, and just put a different background on so it's seen to be sitting on whatever the background is. Hopefully you found the videos in this project interesting and useful. As a new user, it's been quite a steep learning curve if you know nothing about mesh modelling or 3D, but hopefully I've included enough detail that you've been able to follow through and understand what's been happening in the construction of the barn. I will leave a link to download the photographs and reference image, and I'll possibly even put a PDF of all the shortcuts that have been used throughout the 4 videos to try and help a little bit more with a new user's understanding of what's happening. Next we'll be moving on to a new project, which will be the construction of a plasma cutting table, a manual table, but it's based around the steel frames and fabrications theme, and it's the creation of a mesh model to real world sizes constructed with precision around using standard stock steel components, and it's going to be designed in a way that can be built in anybody that's got a moderately equipped home workshop. If you found all this useful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It allows other people to find the videos a little bit more easily, and if you have enjoyed the videos, please like them. It all adds to YouTube sending more people to see them and making them more useful with Blender. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll enjoy the next project, which is looking a little bit more deeper at working in real world sizes. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.